get lunch? I can feel the heat closing in. Feel them out there making their moves, setting up their devil doll stool pigeons, crooning over my spoon and dropper I throw away in Washington Square Station. Fall to turnstile and 2 flights down the iron stairs, catching up down A train. Young, good-looking crew cut, Ivy League advertising exec type fruit holds the door back for me. I'm evidently his idea of a character. You know the type comes on with bartenders and cab drivers talking about right hooks and the Dodgers. Call the counterman in Needix by his first name. A real soul. And right on time, this narcotics dick in a white trench coat. Imagine tailing somebody in a white trench coat, trying to pass as a fag, I guess, hit the platform. I can hear the way he would say it, holding my outfit in his left hand, right hand on his piece. I think you dropped something, fella. But the subway is moving. So long, Flatfoot, I yell, giving the fruit his B production. I look into the fruit's eyes, take in the white teeth, the Florida tan, the $200 shark skin suit, the button-down Brooks Brothers shirt, and carrying the news as a prop. The only thing I read is little Abner. A square wants to come on hip, talks about pod, smoke it now and then, and keep some around to offer the fast Hollywood types. Thanks, kid, I say. I can see you're one of our own. His face lights up like a pinball machine with stupid pink affect. You ever see a hot shot hit, kid? I saw the Gimp catch one in Philly. We rigged his room with a one-way whorehouse mirror and charged Osowski to watch it. He never got the needle out of his arm. They don't if the shot is right. That's the way they find them, dropper full of clotted blood, hanging out of a blue arm. The look in his eyes when it hit kid, it was tasty. Recollect when I'm traveling with a vigilante, best shake man in the industry, out in Chi. We was working the fags in Lincoln Park. So one night the vigilante turns up for work in cowboy boots and a black vest with a hunk of tin on it and a lariat slung over his shoulder. So I says, "What's with you? You wig already?" He just looks at me and says, "Fill your hand, stranger," and hauls out an old rusty 6-shooter. Yet I take off across Lincoln Park, bullets cutting all around me. And he hangs 3 fags before the fuzz nails him. I mean, the vigilante earned his moniker. Ever notice how many expressions carry over from queers to con men? Like, raised. Letting someone know you're in the same line. The shoe store kid, he got his moniker shaking down fetishists in shoe stores, says, give it to a mark with KY and he will come back moaning for more. And when the kid spots a mark, he begins to breathe heavy. His face swells and his lips turn purple like an Eskimo in heat. Then slow, he comes on the mark, feeling for him, palpating him with fingers of rotten ectoplasm. The Rube has this sincere little boy look. Burns through him like blue neon. That one stepped right off a Saturday Evening Post cover with a string of bullheads and preserved himself in junk. His marks never beef, and the bunco people are really carrying a needle for the Rube. One day, little boy Blue starts to slip, and what crows out would make an ambulance attendant puke. The Rube flips in the end, running through empty automats and subway stations, screaming, come back, kid, come back! And follows his boy right into the East River, down through condoms and orange peels, mosaic of floating newspapers, down into the silent black ooze with gangsters in concrete and pistols pounded flat to avoid the probing finger of prurient ballistic experts. And the fruit is thinking, what a character. Wait till I tell the boys in Clark's about this one. He's a character collector. Would stand still for Joe Gould's Seagull Act. So they put it on him for a Sosky and make him eat to sell him some pot, as he calls it, thinking I'll catnip the jerk. Well, I said, tapping my arm, duty calls. As one judge said to another, be just. If you can't be just, be arbitrary. I cut into the automat, and there's Bill Gaines, huddled in someone else's overcoat, looking like a 1910 banker with paresis. And old Bart, shabby and inconspicuous, dunking pound cake with his dirty fingers shiny over the dirt. I had some uptown customers Bill took care of, and Bart knew a few old relics from hop smoking times. Spectral janitors gray as ashes, phantom porters sweeping out dingy halls with a slow old man's hand, coughing and spitting in the junk-sick dawn. Retired asthmatic fences in theatrical hotels. Pent upon Rose, the old madam from Peoria. Stoical Chinese waiters never show sickness. Bart sought them out with his old junkie walk, patient and cautious and slow. Dropped into their bloodless hands a few hours of warmth. I made the ride with him once for kicks. You know how old people lose all shame about eating and it makes you puke to watch them? Old junkies the same about junk. They gibber and squeal at sight of it. The spit hangs off their chins and their stomachs rumble, and all their guts grind in peristalsis while they cook up. dissolving the body's decent skin. You expect any moment a great blob of protoplasm will plop right out and surround the junk. Really disgusts you to see it. Well, my boys will be like that one day, I thought philosophically. Isn't life peculiar? So back downtown by the Sheridan Square station, in case the dick is lurking in the broom closet. Well, the fuzz has my spoon and dropper, and I know they're covered in on my frequency, led by this blind pigeon known as Willie the Disc. Willie has a round disc mouth lined with sensitive erectile black hairs. He is blind from shooting in the eyeball, his nose and palate eaten away, sniffing H. His body a mass of scar tissue, hard and dry as wood. He can only eat the shit now with that mouth. Sometimes sways on a long tube of ectoplasm, feeling for the silent frequency of junk. He follows my trail all over the city, in the rooms I move out already, and the fuzz walks in on some newlywed from Sioux Falls. All right, Lee, come out from behind that strap-on. We know you. And pulls the man's prick off straight away. No, Willie's getting hot. You can hear him always out there in darkness. He only functions at night, whimpering, and feel the terrible urgency of that blind, seeking mouth. When they move in for the bust, Willie goes all out of control, and his mouth eats a hole right through the door. If the cops weren't there to restrain him, with a stock probe he would suck the juice right out of every junkie he ran down. I knew, and everybody else knew. They had the disc on me. And if my kid customers ever hit the stand, he forced me to commit all kind of awful sex acts in return for junk. I knew I could kiss the street goodbye. So we stock up on H, buy a second-hand Studebaker, and head west. The Rube is a social liability with his attacks, as he calls them. The mark inside was coming up on him, and that's a rumble nobody can cool. Outside Philly jumps out to con a prowl car, and the fuzz takes one look at his face and busts all of us. The Rube's attacks become a habitual condition. Cops, doormen, dog secretaries snarl at his approach. The blonde god has fallen to untouchable vileness. Con men don't change. They break. They shatter. Explosions of matter in cold interstellar space drift away in cosmic dust, leave the empty body behind. Hustlers of the world, there is one mark you cannot beat, the mark inside. I left the Rube standing on a corner, red brick slums to the sky under a steady rain of soot. Gonna hit this croaker I know, right back with that good pure drugstore M. No, you wait here. Don't want him to rumble you no matter how long, Rube. Wait for me, right on this corner. Goodbye, Rube. Goodbye, kid. Where do they go when they walk out and leave the body behind? Chicago, invisible hierarchy of decorticated wops. Smell of atrophied gangsters. Earthbound ghost hit you at North and Halsted. Cicero, Lincoln Park. Panhandler of dreams. Past invading the present. Rancid magic of slot machines and roadhouses. Into the interior. A vast subdivision antennae of television to the meaningless sky. In life-proof houses, they hover over the young, sop up a little of what they shut out. Oh, to the young, bring anything in, and they are not young very long. Illinois and Missouri, miasma of mound-building peoples, groveling worship of the food source, cruel and ugly festivals, dead-end horror of the centipede god. It reaches from Moundville to the lunar deserts of coastal Peru. America is not a young land. It is old and dirty and evil. Before the settlers, before the Indians, the evil is there waiting. And always cops, smooth college-trained state cops, practiced apologetic patter. Electronic eyes weigh your car and luggage, clothes and face. Snarling big city dicks, soft-spoken country sheriffs with something black and menacing in old eyes, color of a faded gray flannel shirt. And always car trouble. In St. Louis, traded the 1942 Studebaker in. It has a built-in engineering flaw like the room. On an old Packard limousine, heated up and barely made Kansas City and bought a Ford. Turned out to be an oil burner. Packed it in on a Jeep. We pushed too hard. They are no good for highway driving and burned something out inside and rattling around. Went back to the old Ford V8. Can't beat that engine for getting there, oil burner or no. And the U.S. drag closes around us like no other drag in the world. Worse than the Andes, high mountain towns, cold wind down from postcard mountains. Thin air like death in the throat. River towns of Ecuador. Malaria gray as junk under black Stetsons, muzzle-loading shotguns, vultures pecking through the mud streets. And what hits you when you get off the Malmo ferry in Sweden is no juice tax on the ferry. It knocks all that cheap tax-free juice right out of you and brings you all the way down. Averted eyes in the cemetery in the middle of town. Every town in Sweden seems to be built around a cemetery. And nothing to do in the afternoon, not a bar, not a movie. And I blasted my last stick of Tangier tea and I said, K.E., let's get right back on that ferry. But there is no drag like U.S. drag. You can't see it. You don't know where it comes from. Take one of these cocktail lounges at the end of a subdivision street. Every block of houses has its own bar and drugstore and market and liquor store. You walk in and it hits you, but where does it come from? Not the bartender, not the customers, nor the cream-colored plastic rounding the bar stools, nor the dim neon. not even the TV. And our habits build up with a drag like cocaine will build you up, staying ahead of the sea bring down. And the junk was running low. So there we are in this no-horse town, strictly from cough syrup, and bumming it up to syrup, and drove on, cold spring wind whistling through that old heap around our shivering, junk-sick bodies. And the cold you always come down with when the junk runs out of you. On through the peeled landscape, dead armadillos in the road and vultures over the swamp and cypress stumps. Motels with beaver-board walls, gas heaters, thin pink blankets. Itinerant short con and carny hype men have burned down the croakers of Texas. Day of the Dead. I got the chucks and ate my little Willie's sugar skull. He cried and I had to go out for another. Walked past the cocktail lounge where they blasted the High Life bookie. In Cuernavaca, or was it Tusco, Jane meets a pimp trombone player and disappears in a cloud of tea smoke. The pimp is one of those vibration and dietary artists, which is a means he degrades the female sex by forcing his chicks to swallow all this shit. He was continually enlarging his theories. He would quiz a chick and threaten to walk out if she hadn't memorized every nuance of his latest assault on logic and the human image. Now, baby, I got it here to give, but if you won't receive it, there's just nothing I can do. He was a ritual tea smoker and very puritanical about junk, the way some tea heads are. He claimed tea put him in touch with supra-blue gravitational fields. He had ideas on every subject. What kind of underwear was healthy, when to drink water, and how to wipe your ass. He had a shiny red face and a great spreading smooth nose. Little red eyes that lit up when he looked at a chick and went out when he looked at anything else. His shoulders were very broad and suggested deformity. So he was putting down junk and coming on with tea. I take 3 drags. Jane looked at him, and her flesh crystallized. I leaped up, screaming, "I got the fear," and ran out of the house. Drank a beer in a little restaurant, mosaic bar, and soccer scores and bullfight posters, and waited for the bus to town. A year later in Tangier, I heard she was dead. Benway. So I'm assigned to engage the services of Dr. Benway for Islam Inc. Benway is a manipulator and coordinator of symbol systems, an expert on all phases of interrogation, brainwashing, and control. I have not seen Benway since his precipitate departure from Annexia, where his assignment had been TD, total demoralization. Benway's first act was to abolish concentration camps, mass arrest, and, except under certain limited and special circumstances, the use of torture. I deplore brutality, he said. It's not efficient. On the other hand, prolonged mistreatment, short of physical violence, gives rise, when skillfully applied, to anxiety and a feeling of special guilt. A few rules or other guiding principles are to be borne in mind. The subject must not realize that the mistreatment is a deliberate attack of an anti-human enemy on his personal identity. He must be made to feel that he deserves any treatment he receives, because there is something, never specified, horribly wrong with him. The naked need of the controlled addicts must be decently covered by an arbitrary and intricate bureaucracy, so that the subject cannot contact his enemy direct. As regards the interrogation of suspects, Spanway has this to say. While in general I avoid the use of torture, torture localizes the opponent and mobilizes resistance. The threat of torture is useful to induce in the subject the appropriate feeling of helplessness and gratitude to the interrogator for withholding it. And torture can be employed to advantage as a penalty when the subject is far enough along with the treatment to accept punishment as deserved. To this end, I devised several forms of disciplinary procedure. One was known as the switchboard. Electric drills that can be turned on at any time are clamped against the subject's teeth, and he is instructed to operate an arbitrary switchboard, to put certain connections in certain sockets in response to bells and lights. Every time he makes a mistake, the drills are turned on for 20 seconds. The signals are gradually speeded up beyond his reaction time. Half an hour on the switchboard and the subject breaks down like an overloaded thinking machine. The study of thinking machines teaches us more about the brain than we can learn by introspective methods. Western man is externalizing himself in the form of gadgets. Squatting on old bones and excrement and rusty iron, in a white blaze of heat, a panorama of naked idiots stretches to the horizon. Complete silence. Their speech centers are destroyed, except for the crackle of sparks and the popping of singed flesh as they apply electrodes up and down the spine. White smoke of burning flesh hangs in the motionless air. A group of children have tied an idiot to a post with barbed wire and built a fire between his legs, and stand watching with bestial curiosity as the flames lick his thighs. His flesh jerks in the fire with insect agony. I digress, as usual. Pending more precise knowledge of brain electronics, drugs remain an essential tool of the interrogator in his assault on the subject's personal identity. Many subjects are vulnerable to sexual humiliation. Nakedness, stimulation with aphrodisiacs, constant supervision to embarrass subject and prevent relief of masturbation. Erections during sleep automatically turn on an enormous vibrating electric buzzer that throws the subject out of bed into cold water, thus reducing the incidence of wet dreams to a minimum. Kicks to hypnotize a priest and tell him he's about to consummate a hypostatic union with a lamb, then steer a randy old sheep up his ass. After that, the interrogator can gain complete hypnotic control. The subject will come at his whistle, shit on the floor if he but say, "Open sesame." Needless to say, the sex humiliation angle is contraindicated for overt homosexuals. I mean, let's keep our eye on the ball here and remember the old party line. Never know who's listening in. I recall this one kid I conditioned to shit at sight of me. Then I wash his ass and screw him. It was real tasty, and he was a lovely fella, too. And sometimes a subject will burst into boyish tears because he can't keep from ejaculating when you screw him. Well, as you can plainly see, the possibilities are endless, like meandering paths in a great, big, beautiful garden. We are walking down a long, white hall. Benway's voice drifts into my consciousness from no particular place. A disembodied voice that is sometimes loud and clear, sometimes barely audible, like music down a windy street. We must never forget our glorious Samian heritage. Doc Brubeck was party in a second part. A retired abortionist and junk pusher, he was a veterinarian actually, recalled to service during the manpower shortage. Well, Doc had been in the hospital kitchen all morning, goosing the nurses and tanking up on coal gas and Clem. And just before the operation, he sneaked a double shot of nutmeg to nerve himself up. I had a yahe hang over me and in no condition to take any of Braubeck's shit. First thing he comes on with, I should start the incision from the back instead of the front, muttering some garbled nonsense about being sure to cut out the gallbladder and would fuck up the meat. Thought he was on the farm cleaning a chicken. I told him to go put his head back in the oven, whereupon he had the effrontery to push my hand, severing the patient's femoral artery. Blood spurted up and blinded the anesthetist, who ran out through the hall screaming. Brubeck tried to knee me in the groin, and I managed to hamstring him with my scalpel. He crawled about the floor, stabbing at my feet and legs. Violet, that's my baboon assistant, only woman I ever cared a damn about, really wigged. I climbed up on the table and poised myself to jump on Brubeck with both feet and stomp him when the cops rushed in. Well, this rumble in the operating room, this unspeakable occurrence, as the super put it, you might say was the blow-off. The Wolfpack was closing for the kill. A crucifixion, that's the only word for it. Of course, I'd made a few dumb heights here and there, who hasn't? There was the time me and the anesthetist drank up all the ether and the patient came up on us. And I was accused of cutting the cocaine with Saniflush. Violet did it, actually. I had to protect her, of course. So the wind-up is we are all drummed out of the industry. Not that Violet was a bona fide croaker. Neither was Braubeck. For that matter, even my own certificate was called in question. But Violet knew more medicine than the Mayo Clinic. She had an extraordinary intuition and a high sense of duty. So there I was, flat on my ass with no certificate. Should I turn to another trade? No, doctoring was in my blood. I managed to keep up my habit performing cut-rate abortions in subway toilets. I even descended to hustling pregnant women in the public streets. It was positively unethical. Then I met a great guy, Placenta Juan, the afterbirth tycoon. From the roof of the RC, we survey a scene of unparalleled horror. A contingent of howling simulpaths swing from chandeliers, balconies, and trees, shitting and pissing on passers-by. A simulpath, the technical name for this disorder escapes me, is a citizen convinced he is an ape or other simian. It is a disorder peculiar to the army, and discharge cures it. And mooks trot along cutting off heads, faces sweet and remote with a dreamy half smile. Citizens with incipient bangutot clutch their penises and call on the tourists for help. Arab riders yipe and howl, castrating, disemboweling, throw burning gasoline. Dancing boys strip-tease with intestines. Women stick severed genitals in their cunts, grind, bump, and flick it at the man of their choice. Religious fanatics harangue the crowd from helicopters and rain stone tablets on their heads, inscribed with meaningless messages. Leopard men tear people to pieces with iron claws, coughing and grunting. Quack-udal cannibal society initiates bite off noses and ears. A coprophage calls for a plate, shits on it, and eats the shit, exclaiming, that's my rich substance. Gentle reader, the ugliness of this spectacle buggers description. Who can be a cringing, pissing coward, yet vicious as a purple-assed mandrill, alternating these deplorable conditions like vaudeville skits? Who can shit on a fallen adversary who, dying, eats the shit and screams with joy? Who can hang a weak passive and catch his sperm in mouth like a vicious dog? Gentle reader, I fain would spare you this, but my pen hath its will like the ancient mariner. Oh Christ, what a scene is this! Can tongue or pen accommodate these scandals? A beastly young hooligan has gouged out the eye of his confrere and fucks him in the brain. This brain atrophy already and dries grandmother's cunt. And in Dead Coon County, Arkansas, black as dirt, white as people in the USA, nigger, don't let the sun set on you here. The county coroner comes down with the boo-boos fore and aft. A vigilante committee of neighbors apologetically burned him to death in the courthouse privy when his interesting condition came to light. Now, Clem, just think of yourself as a cow with the aftosa, or a poulton with the foul pest. Don't crowd too close, boys. His intestines are subject to explode in the fire. Rock and roll adolescent hoodlums storm the streets of all nations. They rush into the Louvre and throw acid in the Mona Lisa's face. They open zoos, insane asylums, prisons, burst water mains with air hammers, chop the floor out of passenger plane lavatories, shoot out lighthouses, file elevator cables to one thin wire, turn sewers into the water supply, throw sharks and stingrays, electric eels, and kangaroo into swimming pools. Kangaroo is a small eel-like fish, about 1/4 inch through and 2 inches long, patronizing certain rivers of ill repute in the greater Amazon basin, will dart up your prick or your asshole or a woman's cunt faute de mieux, and hold itself there by sharp spines, with precisely what motives is not known, since no one has stepped forward to observe the kangaroo's life cycle in situ. The black meat. Traffickers in the black meat, flesh of the giant aquatic black centipede, sometimes attaining a length of 6 feet, found in a land of black rocks and iridescent brown lagoons, exhibit paralyzed crustaceans in camouflage pockets of the plaza, visible only to the meat eaters. The meat cafe occupies one side of the plaza, a maze of kitchens, restaurants, sleeping cubicles, perilous iron balconies and basements opening into the underground baths. On stools covered in white satin sit naked mugwumps, sucking translucent colored syrups through alabaster straws. Mugwumps have no liver and nourish themselves exclusively on sweets. Thin purple-blue lips cover a razor-sharp beak of black bone, with which they frequently tear each other to shreds in fights over clients. These creatures secrete an addicting fluid from their erect penises, which prolongs life by slowing metabolism. In fact, all longevity agents have proved addicting an exact ratio to their effectiveness in prolonging life. Addicts of mugwump fluid are known as reptiles. A number of these flow over chairs with their flexible bones and black-pink flesh, a fan of green cartilage covered with hollow rectile hairs through which the reptiles absorb the fluid, sprouts from behind each ear. The fans, which move from time to time, touched by invisible currents, serve also some form of communication known only to reptiles. During the biennial panics, when the raw, peeled dream police storm the city, the mugwumps take refuge in the deepest crevices of the wall, sealing themselves in clay cubicles, and remain for weeks in biostasis. In these days of great terror, the reptiles dart about faster and faster, scream past each other at supersonic speed, their flexible skulls flapping in black winds of insect agony. The dream police disintegrate in globs of rotten ectoplasm, swept away by an old junkie, coughing and spitting in the sick morning. The mugwump man comes with alabaster jars of fluid, and the reptiles get smoothed out. The air is once again still and clear as glycerin. The sailor spotted his reptile. He drifted over and ordered a green syrup. The reptile had a little round disc mouth of brown gristle, expressionless green eyes, almost covered by a thin membrane of eyelid. The sailor waited an hour before the creature picked up his presence. Any eggs for Fats? He asked, his words stirring through the reptile's fan hairs. It took 2 hours for the reptile to raise 3 pink, transparent fingers covered with black fuzz. Several meat eaters lay in vomit, too weak to move. The black meat is like a tainted cheese, overpoweringly delicious and nauseating, so that the eaters eat and vomit and eat again until they fall exhausted. A painted youth slithered in and seized one of the great black claws, sending the sweet, sick smell curling through the cafe. Hospital. The laboratory's been locked for 3 hours solid. I think they're using it for an operating room. Nurse, I can't find her pulse, doctor. Dr. Banway, maybe she's got it up her cunt in a finger stool. Nurse, adrenaline, doctor? Dr. Banway. The night porter shot it all up for kicks. He looks around and picks up one of those rubber vacuum cups at the end of a stick they use to unstop toilets. He advances on the patient. Make an incision, Dr. Limp, he says to his appalled assistant. I'm going to massage the heart. Dr. Limp shrugs and begins the incision. Dr. Benway washes the suction cup by swishing it around in the toilet bowl. Nurse, shouldn't it be sterilized, doctor? Dr. Benway, very likely, but there's no time. He sits on the suction cup like a cane seat, watching his assistant make the incision. You young squirts couldn't lance a pimple without an electric vibrating scalpel with automatic drain and suture. Soon we'll be operating by remote control on patients we never see. We'll be nothing but button pushers. All the skill is going out of surgery, all the know-how and make do. Did I ever tell you about the time I performed an appendectomy with a rusty sardine can? And once I was caught short without instrument one and removed an uterine tumor with my teeth. That was in the upper effendi, and besides, the wench is dead. Dr. Limp, the incision is ready, doctor. Dr. Benway forces the cup into the incision and works it up and down. Blood spurts all over the doctors, the nurse, and the wall. The cup makes a horrible sucking sound. Nurse, I think she's gone, doctor. Dr. Benway, well, it's on a day's work. He walks across the room to a medicine cabinet. Some fucking drug addict has cut my cocaine with Saniflush. Nurse, send the boy out to fill this RX on the double. Dr. Benway is operating in an auditorium filled with students. Now, boys, you won't see this operation performed very often. There's a reason for that. You see, it has absolutely no medical value. No one knows what the purpose of it originally was, or if it had a purpose at all. Personally, I think it was a pure artistic creation from the beginning. Just as a bullfighter, with his skill and knowledge, extricates himself from danger he has himself invoked, so in this operation the surgeon deliberately endangers his patient, and then, with incredible speed and celerity, rescues him from death at the last possible split second. Did any of you ever see Dr. Tetrazzini perform? I say perform advisedly, because his operations were performances. He would start by throwing a scalpel across the room into the patient, and then make his entrance like a ballet dancer. His speed was incredible. I don't give them time to die, he would say. Tumors put him in a frenzy of rage. Fucking undisciplined cells, he would snarl, advancing on the tumor like a knife fighter. A young man leaps down into the operating theater and, whipping out a scalpel, advances on the patient. Dr. Benway, and Espontaneo, stop him before he guts my patient. Harson's Rumpus Room. A Near East mugwump sits naked on a bar stool covered in pink silk. He licks warm honey from a crystal goblet with a long black tongue. His genitals are perfectly formed. Circumcised cock, black, shiny pubic hairs. His lips are thin and purple-blue like the lips of a penis. His eyes blank with insect calm. The mugwump has no liver, maintaining himself exclusive on sweets. Mugwump pushed a slender blonde youth to a couch and strip him expertly. Stand up and turn around, he orders in telepathic pictographs. He ties the boy's hands behind him with a red silk cord. Tonight we make it all the way. No, no, screams the boy. Yes, yes. Cocks ejaculate in silent yes. Mugwump part silk curtains reveal a teakwood gallows against lighted screen of red flint. Gallows is on a dais of Aztec mosaics. The boy crumples to his knees with a long oh, shitting and pissing in terror. He feels the shit warm between his thighs. A great wave of hot blood swells his lips and throat. His body contracts into a fetal position and sperm spurts hot into his face. The mugwump dips hot perfumed water from an alabaster bowl, pensively washes the boy's ass and cock, drying him with a soft blue towel. A warm wind plays over the boy's body and the hairs float free. The mugwump puts a hand under the boy's chest and pulls him to his feet. Holding him by both pinioned elbows, propels him up the steps and under the noose. He stands in front of the boy, holding the noose in both hands. The boy looks into mugwump eyes blank as obsidian mirrors, pools of black blood, glory holes in a toilet wall closing on the last erection. The mugwump slips the noose over the boy's head and tightens the knot caressingly behind the left ear. The boy's penis is retracted, his balls tight. He looks straight ahead, breathing deeply. The mugwump sidles around the boy, goosing him and caressing his genitals in hieroglyphs of mockery. He moves in behind the boy with a series of bumps and shoves his cock up the boy's ass. He stands there, moving in circular gyrations. The guests shush each other, nudge and giggle. Suddenly, the mugwump pushes the boy forward into space, free of his cock. He studies the boy with hands on the hip bones, reaches up with his stylized hieroglyph hands, and snaps the boy's neck. A shudder passes through the boy's body. His penis rises in 3 great surges, pulling his pelvis up, ejaculates immediately. Green sparks explode behind his eyes. A sweet toothache pain shoots through his neck down the spine to the groin, contracting the body in spasms of delight. His whole body squeezes out through his cock. A final spasm throws a great spurt of sperm across the red screen, like a shooting star. The boy falls with soft, gutty suction through a maze of penny arcades and dirty pictures. A sharp turd shoots clean out his ass. Farts shake his slender body. Skyrockets burst in green clusters across a great river. He hears the faint putt-putt of a motorboat in jungle twilight under silent wings of the Anopheles mosquito. The mugwump pulls the boy back onto his cock. The boy squirms, impaled like a speared fish. The mugwump swings on the boy's back, his body contracting in fluid waves. Blood flows down the boy's chin from his mouth, half open, sweet and sulky in death. The mugwump falls with a fluid, sated plop. Windowless cubicle with blue walls. Dirty pink curtain covers the door. Bed bugs crawl on the wall, cluster in corners. A man with white tie and dress shirt, naked from the waist down except for black garters, talks to the queen bee in elegant tones. Queen bees are old women who surround themselves with fairies to form a swarm. It is a sinister Mexican practice. But where is the statuary? He talks out of one side of his face. The other is twisted by the torture of a million mirrors. He masturbates wildly. The queen bee continues the conversation, notices nothing. A horde of lust-mad American women rush in, dripping cunts from farm and dude ranch, factory, brothel, country club, penthouse and suburb, motel and yacht and cocktail bar, strip-off riding clothes, ski togs, evening dresses, Levi's, tea gowns, print dresses, slacks, bathing suits, and kimonos. They scream and yipe and howl, leap on the guests like bitch dogs in heat with rabies. They claw at the hang boys, shrieking, "You fairy, you bastard, fuck me, fuck me, fuck me!" The guests flee screaming, dodge among the hanged boys, overturn iron lungs. AJ's annual party. Mary is strapping on a rubber penis. Steely Dan 3 from Yokohama, she says, caressing the shaft. Milk spurts across the room. Be sure that milk is pasteurized. Don't go giving me some kind of awful cow disease like anthrax or glanders or aftosa. When I was a transvestite, lives in Shy, used to work as an exterminator. Make advances to pretty boys for the thrill of being beaten as a man. Later, I catch this one kid, overpower him with supersonic judo I learned from an old lesbian Zen monk. I tie him up, strip off his clothes with a razor, and fuck him with Steely Dan 1. He is so relieved I don't castrate him literal. He comes all over my bedbug spray. What happened to Steely Dan 1? He was torn in two by a bull dyke. Most terrific vaginal grip I ever experienced. She could cave in a lead pipe. It was one of her parlor tricks. And Steely Dan, too? Chewed to bits by a famished kangaroo in the upper baboon's asshole. And don't say we this time. Why not? It's real boyish. The rising sun fills the room with pink light. Johnny is let in, hands tied between Mary and Mark. Johnny sees the gallows and sighs with a great oh, his chin pulling down towards his cock, his legs bending at the knees. Sperm spurts arching almost vertical in front of his face. Mark and Mary are suddenly impatient and hot. They push Johnny forward onto the gallows platform, covered with moldy jockstraps and sweatshirts. Mark is adjusting the noose. Well, here you go. Mark starts to push Johnny off the platform. Mary, no, let me. She locks her hands behind Johnny's buttocks, puts her forehead against him. Smiling into his eyes, she moves back, pulling him off the platform into space. His face swells with blood. Mark reaches up with one lithe movement and snaps Johnny's neck. Sound like a stick broken in wet towels. A shudder runs down Johnny's body. 1 foot flutters like a trapped bird. Mark has draped himself over a swing and mimics Johnny's twitches, closes his eyes and sticks his tongue out. Johnny's cock springs up, and Mary guides it up her cunt, writhing against him in a fluid belly dance, groaning and shrieking with delight. Sweat pours down her body. Hair hangs over her face in wet strands. Cut him down, Mark, she screams. Mark reaches over with a snap knife and cuts the rope, catching Johnny as he falls, easing him onto his back with Mary still impaled and writhing. She bites away Johnny's lips and nose and sucks out his eyes with a pop. She tears off great hunks of cheek. Now she lunges on his prick. Mark walks over to her, and she looks up from Johnny's half-eaten genitals, her face covered with blood, eyes phosphorescent. Mark puts his foot on her shoulder and kicks her over on her back. He leaps on her, fucking her insanely. They roll from one end of the room to the other, pinwheel end over end, and leap high in the air like a great hooked fish. Let me hang you, Mark. Let me hang you. Please, Mark, let me hang you. Sure, baby. He pulls her brutally to her feet and pins her hands behind her. No, Mark, no, 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 she screams, shitting and pissing in terror as he drags her to the platform. meeting of International Conference of Technological Psychiatry. Dr. Finger Schaefer, the lobotomy kid, rises and turns on the conference the cold blue blast of his gaze. Gentlemen, the human nervous system can be reduced to a compact and abbreviated spinal column. The brain, front, middle, and rear, must follow the adenoid, the wisdom tooth, the appendix. I give you my masterwork, the complete all-American de-anxietized man. Blast of trumpets. The man is carried in naked by two Negro bearers who drop him on the platform with bestial, sneering brutality. The man wriggles. His flesh turns to viscid, transparent jelly that drifts away in green mist, unveiling a monster black centipede. Waves of unknown stench fill the room, searing the lungs, grabbing the stomach. Man, he done seen the light, said one of the Negro bearers. We must stomp out the un-American critter, says a fat, frog-faced Southern doctor who's been drinking corn out of a mason jar. He advances drunkenly and then halts, appalled by the formidable size and menacing aspect of the centipede. Fetch gasoline, he bellows. We gotta burn this son of a bitch like an uppity nigger. The centipede is rushing about in agitation. Man, that motherfucker's hungry, screams one of the bearers. I'm getting out of here, me. A wave of electric horror sweeps through the conference. They storm the exits, screaming and clawing. The market. Panorama of the city of Interzone. A composite city where all human potentials are spread out in a vast silent market. Minarets, palms, mountains, jungle, a sluggish river jumping with vicious fish. Vast weed-grown parks where boys lie in the grass, play cryptic games. Not a locked door in the city. Anyone comes into your room at any time. The chief of police is a Chinese who picks his teeth and listens to denunciations presented by a lunatic. Every now and then the Chinese takes the toothpick out of his mouth and looks at the end of it. Hipsters with smooth, copper-colored faces lounge in doorways, twisting shrunk heads on gold chains, their faces blank with an insect's unseeing calm. All houses in the city are joined. Houses of sod. High mountain Mongols blink in smoky doorways. Houses of bamboo and teak. Houses of adobe, stone, and red brick. South Pacific and Maori houses. Houses and trees and riverboats. Wood houses 100 feet long sheltering entire tribes. Houses of boxes and corrugated iron where old men sit in rotten rags cooking down canned heat. Great rusty iron racks rising 200 feet in the air from swamps and rubbish, with perilous partitions built on multi-level platforms and hammocks swinging over the void. The city is visited by epidemics of violence, and the untended dead are eaten by vultures in the streets. Albinos blink in the sun. Boys sit in trees, languidly masturbate. People eaten by unknown diseases watch the passerby with evil, knowing eyes. In the city market is the meat cafe. Followers of obsolete, unthinkable trades doodling in Etruscan. Addicts of drugs not yet synthesized. Pushers of souped-up harmalin. Junk reduced to pure habit, offering precarious vegetable serenity. Liquids to induce Lata. Tithonian longevity serums. Black marketeers of World War III, excisers of telepathic sensitivity, osteopaths of the spirit, investigators of infractions denounced by bland, paranoid chess players, servers of fragmentary warrants taken down in hebephrenic shorthand, charging unspeakable mutilations of the spirit, bureaucrats of spectral departments, officials of unconstituted police states, a lesbian dwarf who has perfected Operation Bangu Tote, the lung erection that strangles the sleeping enemy, sellers of orgone tanks and relaxing machines, brokers of exquisite dreams and memories, tested on the sensitized cells of junk sickness and bartered for raw materials of the will. Doctors skilled in the treatment of diseases dormant in the black dust of ruined cities, gathering virulence in the white blood of eyeless worms, feeling slowly to the surface in the human host. Maladies of the ocean floor and the stratosphere, maladies of the laboratory and atomic war. A place where the unknown past and the emergent future meet in a vibrating, soundless hum. Larval entities waiting for a live one. A funeral passes through the market. Black coffin, Arabic inscriptions in filigreed silver, carried by 4 pallbearers. Procession of mourners singing the funeral song. Clem and Jody falling beside them carrying coffin. The corpse of a hog bursts out of it. The hog is dressed in a jalaba. A keef pipe juts from its mouth. One hoof holds a packet of feezy pictures. A mezuzah hangs about its neck. Inscribed on the coffin, this was the noblest Arab of them all. They sing hideous parody of the funeral song in false Arabic. Jody can do a fake Chinese spiel that'll just kid you, like a hysterical ventriloquist dummy. In fact, he precipitated an anti-foreign riot in Shanghai that claimed 3,000 casualties. Stand up, Gertie, and show respect for the local gooks. I suppose one should. My dear, I'm working on the most marvelous invention. A boy who disappears as soon as you come, leaving a smell of burning leaves and a sound effect of distant train whistles. This you gotta hear. Boy in Los Angeles, 15-year-old. Father decided it's time the boy have his first piece of ass. Boy's lying on the lawn reading comic books. Father go out and say, "Son, here's $20. I want you to go to a good whore and get a piece of ass off her." So they drive to this plush jump joint. And the father say, "All right, son, you're on your own. So ring the bell, and when the woman come, give her the $20 and tell her you want a piece of ass. Solid pop." So about 15 minutes later, the boy comes out. "Well, son, did you get a piece of ass?" "Yeah. This gash comes to the door and I say I want a piece of ass and lay the double sauceky on her. We go up to her trap and she removed her dry goods. So I switch my blade and cut a big hunk off her ass. She raised up beef like I am reduced to pull off one shoe and beat her brains out. Then I hump her for kicks." Another installment in the adventures of Clem Snide, the private asshole. So I walk in the joint and this female hustler sits at the bar. And I think, oh God, you're pool deluxe already. I mean, it's like I see the gash before. So I don't pay her no mind at first. Then I dig she is rubbing her legs together and working her feet up behind her head. Shoves it down to give herself a douche job with a gadget sticks out of her nose, the way a body can't help but notice. Irish, half Chinese and half Negro, addicted to dehydroxyheroin, takes a shot every 15 minutes, to which end she leaves droppers and needles sticking out all over her. The needles rust in her dry flesh, which here and there has grown completely over a joint to form a smooth green-brown wen. On the table in front of her is a samovar of tea and a 20-pound hamper of brown sugar. No one has ever seen her eat anything else. It's only just before a shot that she hears what anyone says or talks herself. Then she makes some flat, factual statement relative to her own person. My asshole is occluding. My cunt got terrible green juices. Iris is one of Benway's projects. The human body can run on sugar alone, goddammit. I'm aware that certain of my learned colleagues who are tempted to belittle my genius work claim that I put vitamins and proteins into Iris's sugar clandestinely. I challenge these nameless assholes to crawl up out of their latrines and run a spot analysis on Iris's sugar and her tea. Iris is a wholesome American cunt. I deny categorically that she nourishes herself on semen. And let me take this opportunity to state that I'm a reputable scientist, not a charlatan, a lunatic, or a pretended worker of miracles. I never claimed that Iris could subsist exclusively on photosynthesis. I did not say she could breathe in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen. I confess I have been tempted to experiment, being of course restrained by my medical ethics. In short, the vile slanders of my creeping opponents will inevitably fall back onto them and come to roost like a homing stool pigeon. Ordinary men and women. So this elegant faggot comes to New York from Cunt Lick, Texas, and he is the most piss-elegant fag of them all. He is taken up by old women of the type batting on young fags. Toothless old predators, too weak and too slow to run down other prey. Yes, his old moth-eaten tigress shit sure turn into a fag eater. So this citizen, being an arty and crafty fag, begins making costume jewelry and jewelry sets. Every rich old gash in greater New York wants she should do her sets, and he is making money. 21, El Morocco, the Stork, but no time for sex and all the time worrying about his rep. He begins playing the horses. Supposed to be something manly about gambling, God knows why. And he figures it will build him up to be seen at the track. Now, not many fags play the horses, and those that play lose more than the others. They're lousy gamblers, plunge in a losing streak, and hedge when they win, which being the pattern of their lives. So he loses and loses and loses some more. One day he is about to put a rock in a set when the obvious occurs. Of course, I'll replace it later. Famous last words. So all that winter, one after the other, the diamonds, emeralds, pearls, rubies, and stars, sapphires of the haute monde go in hock, replaced by queer replicas. So the opening night of the Met, this old hag appears as she thinks resplendent in her diamond tiara. This other old whore approach and say, "Oh, Miggles, you're so smart. To leave the real ones at home, I mean, we're simply mad to go around tempting fate. You're mistaken, my dear. These are real. Oh, but Megals, darling, they're not. I mean, ask your jeweler. Well, just ask anybody. So Sabbath is hastily called. Lucy Bradshinkle looked to thy emeralds. All these old witches examining their rocks like a citizen find leprosy on himself. My chicken bun Ruby. My black umbles. Old bitch marries so many times, so many gooks and spicks she don't know her accent from her ass. My star sapphire, shake a pool deluxe. Oh, it's all so I mean, they're strictly from Walworth. There's only one thing to do. I'm going to call the police, says a strong-minded, outspoken old thing, and she clomps across the floor on her low heels and calls the fuzz. Well, the faggot draws a deuce, and in the box he meets this cat who is some species of cheap hustler, and love sets in, or at least a facsimile thereof, convince the parties in a first and second parts. As continuity would have it, they are sprung at the same time, more or less, and take up residence in a flat on the Lower East Side, and cook in, and both are working legit, modest jobs. So Brad and Jim know happiness for the first time. Enter the powers of evil. Lucy Bradshinkle has come to say all is forgiven. She has faith in Brad and wants to set him up in a studio. Of course, he will have to move to the East 60s. This place is impossible, darling. And your friend. A safe mob wants Jim back to drive a car. This is a step up, you dig. Offer from citizens hardly seen him before. Will Jim go back to crime? Will Brad succumb to the blandishments of an aging vampire or ravening maw? Needless to say, the forces of evil are routed and exit with ominous snarls and mutterings. The boss isn't gonna like this. I don't know why I ever wasted my time with you, you cheap, vulgar little fairy. The boys stand at the tenement window, their arms around each other, looking at the Brooklyn Bridge. A warm spring wind ruffles Jim's black curls and the fine headed hair of Brad. Well, Brad, what's for supper? You just go in the other room and wait. Playfully, he shoos Jim out of the kitchen and puts on his apron. Dinner is Lucy Bradshinkle's consignon, cooked in Codex Papillon. The boys eat happily, looking into each other's eyes. Blood runs down their chins. Did I ever tell you about the man who taught his asshole to talk? His whole abdomen would move up and down, you dig, farting out the words. It was unlike anything I ever heard. This ass talk had a sort of gut frequency. It hit you right down there like you gotta go. You know, when the old colon gives you the elbow and you feel sort of cold inside and you know all you have to do is turn loose? Well, this talking hits you right down there, a bubbly, thick, stagnant sound, a sound you could smell. This man worked for a carnival, you dig, and to start with, it was like a novelty ventriloquist act. Real funny, too, at first. He had a number he called a better old. It was a scream, I tell you. I forget most of it, but it was clever. Like, "Oh, say, are you still down there, old thing?" "No, I had to go relieve myself." After a while, the ass started talking on its own. He would go in without anything prepared, and his ass would ad-lib and toss the gags back at him every time. Then it developed sort of teeth like little raspy incurving hooks and started eating. He thought this was cute at first and built an act around it, but the asshole would eat its way through his pants and start talking on the street, shouting out it wanted equal rights. Yeah, it would get drunk too and have crying jags. Nobody loved it and it wanted to be kissed same as any other mouth. Finally it talked all the time, day and night. You could hear him for blocks screaming at it to shut up and beating it with his fists and sticking candles up it. But nothing did any good. And the asshole said to him, "It's you who will shut up in the end, not me. Because we don't need you around here anymore. I can talk and eat and shit." After that, he began waking up in the morning with a transparent jelly like a tadpole's tail all over his mouth. This jelly was what the scientists call UNDT, undifferentiated tissue, which can grow into any kind of flesh on the human body. He would tear it off his mouth, and the pieces would stick to his hands like burning gasoline jelly and grow there. Grow anywhere on him, a glob of it fell. So finally his mouth sealed over and the whole head would have amputated spontaneous. Did you know this condition occurs in parts of Africa and only among Negroes where the little toe amputates spontaneously? Except for the eyes, you dig. That's one thing the asshole couldn't do was see. It needed the eyes. But nerve connections were blocked and infiltrated and atrophied, so the brain couldn't give orders anymore. It was trapped in the skull, sealed off. For a while you could see the silent, helpless suffering of the brain behind the eyes. Then finally the brain must have died because the eyes went out, and there was no more feeling in them than a crab's eye on the end of a stalk. The huntsmen have gathered for the hunt breakfast in the Swarm Bar, a hangout for elegant pansies. The huntsmen strut about with imbecile narcissism in black leather jackets and studded belts, flexing their muscles for the fags to feel. They all wear enormous falsy baskets. Every now and then one of them throws a fag to the floor and pisses on him. They are drinking Victory Punch, compounded of paregoric, Spanish Fly, heavy black rum, Napoleon brandy and canned heat. The punch is served from a great hollow gold baboon, crouched in snarling terror, snapping at a spear in its side. You twist the baboon's balls and the punch runs out his cock. From time to time, hot hors d'oeuvres pop out the baboon's ass with a loud farting noise. When this happens, the huntsmen roar with bestial laughter, and the fags shriek and twitch. Master of the hunt is Captain Everard, who was drummed out of the Queen's 69th for palming a jockstrap in a game of strip poker. Motorcycles careening, jumping, overturning, spitting, shrieking, shitting baboons fighting hand to hand with the huntsman, Riderless cycles scrabbling about in the dust like crippled insects, attacking baboon and huntsman. The party leader rides in triumph through yipping crowds. A dignified old man sits at sight of him and tries to sacrifice himself under the wheels of the car. They have no feelings, said Dr. Benway, slashing his patient to shreds. Just reflexes. I urge distraction. The age of consent is when they learn to talk. May all your troubles be little ones, as one child molester said to the other. The market is empty, except for an old drunkard of indeterminate nationality, passed out with his head in a peace war. The rioters erupt into the market, yipping and screaming, "Death to the French!" and tear the drunkard to pieces. A whimpering queen falls to the floor in an orgasm. Oh, God, it's too exciting, like a million hot throbbing cocks. Benway, like to run a blood test on those boys. A portentously inconspicuous man, gray beard and gray face and shabby brown jalaba, sings in a slight unplaceable accent without opening his lips. Oh, you dolls, you great big beautiful dolls. Squads of police with thin lips, big noses, and cold gray eyes move into the market from every entrance street. They club and kick the rioters with cold, methodical brutality. The rioters have been carted away in trucks. The shutters go up and the citizens of Interzone step out into the square, littered with teeth and sandals and slippery with blood. Oh. Islam Incorporated and the parties of Interzone. I was working for an outfit known as Islam Inc., financed by A.J., the notorious merchant of sex, who scandalized international society when he appeared at the Duc de Ventre's ball as a walking penis covered by a huge condom emblazoned with the A.J. motto, "They shall not pass." "Rather bad taste, old boy," said the Duke. To which A.J. replied, "Up yours with Interzone KY." The reference is to the KY scandal, which was still in a larval state at that time. A.J.'s repartee often refers to future events. He is a master of the delayed squelch. A.J. once reserved a table a year in advance chez Robert, where a huge icy gourmet broods over the greatest cuisine in the world. So baneful and derogatory is his gaze that many a client under that withering blast has rolled on the floor and pissed all over himself in convulsive attempts to ingratiate. So A.J. arrives with 6 Bolivian Indians who chew coca leaves between courses. And when Robert, in all his gourmet majesty, bears down on the table, A.J. looks up and yells, "Hey, boy, bring me some ketchup." 30 gourmets stopped chewing at once. You could have heard a souffle drop. As for Robert, he lets out a bellow of rage like a wounded elephant, runs to the kitchen and arms himself with a meat cleaver. The sommelier snarls hideously, his face turning a strange iridescent purple. He breaks off a bottle of Brut Champagne 26. Pierre, the head waiter, snatches up a boning knife. All 3 chase A.J. through the restaurant with mangled, inhuman screams of rage. Tables overturned, vintage wines and matchless food crash to the floor. Cries of "Lynch him!" ring through the air. An elderly gourmet with the insane bloodshot eyes of a mandrill is fashioning a hangman's knot with a red velvet curtain cord. Seeing himself cornered and in imminent danger of dismemberment at least, A.J. plays his trump card. He throws back his head and lets out a hog call. And 100 famished hogs he had stationed nearby rush into the restaurant, slopping the haute cuisine. Like a great tree, Robert falls to the floor in a stroke, where he is eaten by the hogs. "Poor bastards don't know enough to appreciate him," says A.J. Robert's brother Paul emerges from retirement in a local nut house and takes over the restaurant to dispense something he calls the transcendental cuisine. Imperceptibly, the quality of the food declines until he is serving literal garbage, the clients being too intimidated by the reputation of Chez Robert to protest. Sample menu: the clear camel piss soup with boiled earthworms, the fillet of sun-ripened stingray, basted with eau de cologne and garnished with nettles, the afterbirth supreme de boeuf, cooked in drained crankcase oil, served with a piquant sauce of rotten egg yolks and crushed bedbugs, the Limburger cheese sugar-cured in diabetic urine, doused in canned heat, flamboyant. So the clients are quietly dying of botulism. Then A.J. returns with an entourage of Arab refugees from the Middle East. He takes one mouthful and screams, "Garbage, goddammit! Cook this wise citizen in his own swill." Manhattan Serenade. A.J. and entourage start into a New York nightclub. A.J. is leading a purple-ass baboon on a gold chain. A.J. is dressed in checked linen +4s with a cashmere jacket. Manager: Wait a minute. What's that? A.J. It's an Illyrian poodle. Choicest beast a man can latch on to. It'll raise the tone of your trap. Manager: I suspect it to be a purple-assed baboon, and it stands outside. Stooge: Don't you know who this is? It's A.J., last of the big-time spenders. Manager: Leave him take his purple-assed bastard and big-time spend someplace else. AJ stops in front of another club and looks in. Elegant fags and old cunts, God damn it, we come to the right place. Avanti, ragazzi. He drives a gold stake into the floor and pickets the baboon. He begins talking in elegant tones, his stooges filling in. Fantastic, monstrous, utter heaven. AJ puts a long cigarette holder in his mouth. The holder is made of some obscenely flexible material. It swings and undulates as if endowed with loathsome reptilian life. AJ. So there I was, flat on my stomach at 30,000 feet. Several nearby fags raise their heads, like animals scenting danger. AJ leaps to his feet with an inarticulate snarl. You purple-ass cocksucker, he screams. I'll teach you to shit on the floor. He pulls the whip from his umbrella and cuts the baboon across the ass. The baboon screams and tears loose the stake. He leaps on the next table and climbs up an old woman who dies of heart failure on the spot. AJ, sorry lady, discipline you know. In a frenzy, he whips the baboon from one end of the bar to the other. The baboon, screaming and snarling and shitting with terror, climbs over the clients, runs up and down the bar, swings from drapes and chandeliers. AJ, you'll straighten up and shit right or you won't be in a condition to shit, one way or the other. Stooge, you ought to be ashamed of yourself, upsetting AJ after all he's done for you. AJ, ingrates, every one of them ingrates. Take it from an old queen. Salvador Hassan O'Leary, alias the Shoe Store Kid, alias Wrong Way Marv, alias Afterbirth Leary, alias Slunky Pete, alias Placenta Juan, alias KY Ahmed, alias El Chinche, alias El Culito, etc., etc., for 15 solid pages of dossier. First tangled with the law in New York City, where he was traveling with a character known to the Brooklyn police as Blubber Wilson, who hustled his goopball money, shaking down fetishists in shoe stores. Hassan was charged with third-degree extortion and conspiracy to impersonate a police officer. He had learned the shake man's number one rule, DT, ditch tin, which correspond to the pilot's KFS, keep flying speed. As the vigilante puts it, if you get a rumble, kid, ditch your piece of tin if you have to swallow it. So they didn't bust him with a queer badge. Hassan testified against Wilson, who drew pen in deaf. Longest term possible under New York law for a misdemeanor conviction. Nominally an indefinite sentence, it means 3 years in Rikers Island. Hassan's case was noli prosi. I'd have drawn a nickel, Hassan said, if I hadn't met a decent cop. Hassan met a decent cop every time he took a fall. His dossier contains 3 pages of monikers indicating his proclivity for cooperating with the law. Playing ball, the cops call it. Others call it something else. Abe the Fuzz Lover, Finky Marv, the Crooning Hebe, Allie the Stool, Rongo Cell, the Wailing Spick, the Shinny Soprano, the Bronx Opera House, the Copper Gin, the Answering Service, the Squeaking Syrian, the Cooing Cocksucker, the Musical Fruit, the Wrong Asshole, the Fairy Fink, Leary the Narc, the lilting leprechaun, grassy girt. He opened a sex shop in Yokohama, pushed junk in Beirut, pimped in Panama. During World War II, he shifted into high, took over a dairy in Holland, and cut the butter with used axle grease. Cornered the KY market in North Africa, and finally hit the jackpot with slumps. He prospered and proliferated, flooding the world with cut medicines and cheap counterfeit goods of every variety. Adulterated shark repellent, cut antibiotics, condemned parachutes, stale anti-venom, inactive serums and vaccines, leaking lifeboats. You ever dig the Mayan codices? I figure it like this. The priests, about 1% of the population, made with one-way telepathic broadcasts, instructing the workers what to feel and when. A telepathic sender has to send all the time. He can never receive, because if he receives, that means someone else has feelings of his own, could louse up his continuity. The sender has to send all the time, but he can't ever recharge himself by contact. Sooner or later, he's got no feelings to send. You can't have feelings alone. Not alone like the sender is alone. And you dig there can only be one sender at one place time. Finally, the screen goes dead. The sender has turned into a huge centipede. So the workers come in on the beam and burn the centipede and elect a new sender by consensus of the general will. The Mayans were limited by isolation. Now one sender could control the planet. You see, control can never be a means to any practical end. It can never be a means to anything but more control. Like junk. The county clerk. The county clerk has his office in a huge red brick building known as the Old Courthouse. Civil cases are, in fact, tried there, the proceedings inexorably dragging out until the contestants die or abandon litigation. This is due to the vast number of records pertaining to absolutely everything, all filed in the wrong place, so that no one but the county clerk and his staff of assistants can find them. And he often spends years in the search. In fact, he is still looking for material relative to a damaged suit that was settled out of court in 1910. The old courthouse is located in the town of Pigeonhole, outside the urban zone. The inhabitants of this town and the surrounding area of swamps and heavy timber are people of such great stupidity and such barbarous practices that the administration has seen fit to quarantine them. In retaliation, the citizens of Pigeonhole plaster their town with signs. Urbanite, don't let the sun set on you here. An unnecessary injunction, since nothing but urgent business would take any urbanite to Pigeonhole. Lee's case is urgent. He has to file an immediate affidavit that he is suffering from bubonic plague to avoid eviction from the house he has occupied 10 years without paying rent. He exists in perpetual quarantine. So he packs his suitcase of affidavits and petitions and injunctions and certificates and takes a bus to the frontier. The urbanite custom inspector waves him through. I hope you got an atom bomb in that suitcase. The door of the county clerk's office is open. The county clerk sits inside, gum and snuff, surrounded by 6 assistants. Lee stands in the doorway. The county clerk goes on talking without looking up. They burned that old nigger over in Cunt Lick. Nigger had the aftosin and left him stone blind. So this white girl down from Texarkana screeches out, Roy, that old nigger's looking at me so nasty. Land sakes, I feel just dirty all over. Now, sweet thing, don't you fret yourself. Me and the boys will burn him. Do it slow, honey face, do it slow. He's give me a sick headache. So they burned the nigger, and that old boy took his wife and went back up to Texarkana without paying for the gasoline. And old Whispering Lou runs the service station. Couldn't talk about nothing else all fall. These city fellas come down here and burn a nigger and don't even settle up for gasoline. Lee cleared his throat. The clerk looked at him over his glasses. Now, if you'll take care, young fella, till I finish what I'm a-saying, I'll tend to your business. And he plunged into an anecdote about a nigger got the hydrophobia from a cow. So my pappy says to me, finish up your chores, son, and let's go see the mad nigger. They had that nigger chained to the bed, and he was bawling like a cow. I soon got enough of that old nigger. Well, if you all will excuse me, I got business in the Privy Council. Lee listened in horror. The county clerk often spent weeks in the Privy, living on scorpions and Montgomery Ward catalogs. On several occasions, his assistants had forced the door and carried him out in an advanced state of malnutrition. Lee decided to play his last card. Mr. Anchor, he said, I'm appealing to you as one razorback to another. And he pulled out his razorback card, a memento of his lush-rolling youth. The clerk looked at the card suspiciously. You don't look like a bodie-feedy, mash-fed razorback to me. What you think about the Jews? Well, Mr. Hanker, you know yourself all a Jew wants to do is doodle a Christian girl. One of these days, we'll cut the rest of it off. Well, you talk right sensible for a city feller. Find out what he wants and take care of him. He's a good old boy. Interzone. The zone is a single vast building. The rooms are made of a plastic cement that bulges to accommodate people, but when too many crowd into one room, there is a soft plop, and someone squeezes through the wall right into the next house. The next bed, that is, since the rooms are mostly bed where the business of the zone is transacted. A hum of sex and commerce shakes the zone like a vast hive. Interzone Imports Unlimited, which consists of Marvy and Life the Unlucky, had latched on to the KY deal. Marvy had been in Interzone since the year before one, as he put it. He had been retired from some unspecified position in the State Department for the good of the service. Obviously, he had once been very good-looking in a crew-cut college boy way, but his face had sagged and formed lumps under the chin like melting paraffin. He was getting heavy around the hips. Life the Unlucky was a tall, thin Norwegian with a patch over one eye. His face congealed in a permanent, ingratiating smirk. Behind him lay an epic saga of unsuccessful enterprises. He had failed at raising frogs, chinchilla, Siamese fighting fish, Ramian culture pearls. He had attempted, variously and without success, to promote the lovebird two-in-a-coffin cemetery, to corner the condom market during the rubber shortage, to run a mail-order whorehouse, to issue penicillin as a patent medicine. He had followed disastrous betting systems in the casinos of Europe and the racetracks of the U.S. His reverses in business were matched by the incredible mischances of his personal life. His front teeth had been stomped out by bestial American sailors in Brooklyn. Vultures had eaten out an eye when he drank a pint of paregoric and passed out in a Panama City park. He had been trapped between floors in an elevator for 5 days with an oil-burning junk habit, and sustained an attack of DTs while stowing away in a footlocker. Then there was the time he collapsed with strangulated intestines, perforated ulcers, and peritonitis in Cairo, and the hospital was so crowded they bedded him in the latrine, and the Greek surgeon goofed and sewed up a live monkey in him, and he was gang-fucked by the Arab attendants. And one of the orderlies stole the penicillin, substituting Saniflush. At the time he got clap in his ass, and a self-righteous English doctor cured him with an enema of hot sulfuric acid. The examination. Carl Peterson found a postcard in his box requesting him to report for a 10 o'clock appointment with Dr. Banway in the Ministry of Mental Hygiene and Prophylaxis. What on earth could they want with me, he thought irritably. A mistake, most likely. But he knew they didn't make mistakes. Certainly not mistakes of identity. Carl entered the steel enamel labyrinth of the ministry, strode to the information desk, and presented his card. 5th floor, room 26. In room 26, a nurse looked at him with cold undersea eyes. Dr. Benway is expecting you, she said, smiling. Go right in. As if he had nothing to do but wait for me, thought Carl. The office was completely silent and filled with a milky light. The doctor shook Carl's hand, keeping his eyes on the young man's chest. I've seen this man before, Carl thought, but where? He sat down and crossed his legs. He glanced at an ashtray on the desk and lit a cigarette. He turned to the doctor, a steady, inquiring gaze in which there was more than a touch of insolence. The doctor seemed embarrassed. He fidgeted and coughed and fumbled with papers. He said finally, your name is Carl Peterson, I believe. His glasses slid down onto his nose in parody of the academic manner. Carl nodded silently. The doctor did not look at him, but seemed nonetheless to register the acknowledgment. He pushed his glasses back into place with one finger and opened a file on the white enamel desk. Carl Peterson. He repeated the name caressingly, pursed his lips and nodded several times. He spoke again abruptly. You know, of course, we are trying. We're all trying. Sometimes, of course, we don't succeed. His voice trailed off thin and tenuous. He put a hand to his forehead. To adjust the state, simply a tool, to the needs of each individual citizen. His voice boomed out so unexpectedly deep and loud that Carl started. That is the only function of the state, as we see it, our knowledge, incomplete, of course. He made a slight gesture of depreciation. For example, take the matter of a sexual deviation. The doctor rocked back and forth in his chair. His glasses slid down onto his nose. Carl felt suddenly uncomfortable. Frankly, we don't pretend to understand, at least not completely, why some men and women prefer the sexual company of their own sex. We do know that the phenomena is common enough and under certain circumstances a matter of concern to this department. Treatment of these disorders is at the present time symptomatic. The doctor suddenly threw himself back in his chair and burst into peals of metallic laughter. Ha! 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 Carl watched him appalled. The man is insane, he thought. The doctor's face went blank as a gambler's. Carl felt an odd sensation in his stomach, like the sudden stopping of an elevator. The doctor was studying the file in front of him. He spoke in a tone of slightly condescending amusement. Don't look so frightened, young man, just a professional joke. To say treatment is symptomatic means there is none, except to make the patient feel as comfortable as possible. And that is precisely what we attempt to do in these cases. Once again, Carl felt the impact of that cold interest on his face. That is to say, reassurance when reassurance is necessary, and of course, suitable outlets with other individuals of similar tendencies. No isolation is indicated. The condition is no more directly contagious than cancer. Cancer, my first love. The doctor's voice receded. He seemed actually to have gone away through an invisible door, leaving his empty body sitting there at the desk. And so, Carl, you will please oblige to tell me how many times and under what circumstances you have indulged in homosexual acts? His voice drifts away. If you have never done so, I should be inclined to think of you as somewhat a typical young man. The doctor raises a coy, admonishing finger. In any case, he tapped the file and flashed a hideous leer. Carl noticed that the file was 6 inches thick. In fact, it seemed to have thickened enormously since he entered the room. Well, when I was doing my military service, these queers used to proposition me, and sometimes when I was blank. Yes, of course, Carl, the doctor brayed heartily. In your position, I would have done the same. I don't mind telling you. Well, I guess we can dismiss as irrelevant these understandable means of replenishing the exchequer. And now, Carl, there were perhaps one finger tapped the file, which gave out a faint effluvia of moldy jockstraps and chlorine. Occasions when no economic factors were involved. A green flare exploded in Carl's brain. He saw Hans's lean brown body twisting towards him, quick breath on his shoulder. The flare went out. Some huge insect was squirming in his hand, his whole being jerked away in an electric spasm of revulsion. Carl got to his feet, shaking with rage. "What are you writing there?" he demanded. Do you often doze off like that, in the middle of a conversation? I wasn't asleep, that is. You weren't? It's just that the whole thing is unreal. I'm going now. I don't care. You can't force me to stay. He was walking across the room towards the door. He had been walking a long time. A creeping numbness dragged his legs. The door seemed to recede. Where can you go, Carl? The doctor's voice reached him from a great distance. Out, away, through the door. The green door, Carl. The doctor's voice was barely audible. The whole room was exploding out into space. Have you seen Pennapon Rose? The gangster in concrete rolls down the river channel. They cowboyed him in the steam room. Is this cherry-ass Gio the towel boy? Or Mother Gillig, old auntie of Westminster Place? Only dead fingers talk in Braille. The Mississippi rolls great limestone boulders down the silent alley. Distant rumble of stomachs, poisoned pigeons rain from the northern lights. The reservoirs are empty. Brass statues crash through the hungry squares and alleys of the gaping city. Probing for a vein in the junk-sick morning, strictly from cough syrup, 1,000 junkies storm the crystal spine clinics, cook down the gray ladies. In the limestone cave, met a man with Medusa's head in a hat box and said, "Be careful," to the customs inspector. Frozen forever, hand an inch from the false bottom. Coke bugs. The sailor's gray felt hat and black overcoat hung twisted in atrophied yen weight. Morning sun outlined the sailor in the orange-yellow flame of junk. He had a paper napkin under his coffee cup, mark of those who do a lot of sitting over coffee in the plazas, restaurants, terminals, and waiting rooms of the world. A junkie, even at the sailor's level, runs on junk time. And when he makes his importunate eruption into the time of others, like all petitioners, he must wait. How many coffees in an hour? A boy came in and sat at the counter in broken lines of long, sick junk weight. The sailor shivered. His face fuzzed out of focus in a shuddering brown mist. His hands moved on the table, reading the boy's braille. His eyes traced little dips and circles, following the whorls of brown hair on the boy's neck in a slow, searching movement. The boy stirred and scratched the back of his neck. Something bit me, Joe. What kind of creep joint you run here? Coke bugs, kid, Joe said, holding eggs up to the light. I was traveling with Irene Kelly, and her was a sporting woman. In Butte, state of Montana, her got the coke cars and run through the hotel screaming Chinese coppers chase her with meat cleavers. I knew this cop in Chai sniffed coke used to come in form of crystals, blue crystals. So her go nuts and start screaming the Federals is after him and run down this alley and stick his head in the garbage can. And I said, what you think you're doing? And her say, get away or I shoot you. I got myself hid good. Well, when the roll is called up yonder, we'll be there, right? Joe looked at the sailor and spread his hands, and the junkie shrugged. The sailor spoke in his feeling voice that reassembles in your head, spelling out the words with cold fingers. Your connection is broken, kid. The boy shied, his street boy face torn with black scars of junk retained a wild, broken innocence, shy animals peering out through gray arabesques of terror. I don't dig you, Jack. The sailor leapt into sharp, junky focus. He turned back his coat lapel, showing a brass hypo needle covered with mold and verdigris. Retired for the good of the service. Sit down and have a blueberry crumb pie on the expense account. Your monkey loves it, makes his coat glossy. The boy felt a touch on his arm across 8 feet of morning lunchroom. He was suddenly siphoned into the booth, landing with an inaudible slip. He looked into the sailor's eyes, a green universe stirred by cold black currents. You an agent, mister? I prefer the word vector. His sounding laughter vibrated through the boy's substance. You hold him, man, I got the bread. I don't want your money, honey. I want your time. I don't dig. You want fix, you want straight, you want a nun. The sailor cradled something pink and vibrated out of focus. Yeah. We'll take the Independent. Got their own special heat. Don't carry guns, only saps. I recall me and the fag fell once in Queens Plaza. Stay away from Queens Plaza, son. Evil spot, fuzz haunted. Too many levels, heat flares out from the broom closet high on ammonia, like burning lions. Fall on poor old lush workers, scare her veins right down to the bone. Her skin pop a week or do that 529 kick, handed out free and gratis by New York City to jostling junkies. So fag, beagle Irish, sailor beware. Look down along that line before you travel there. The subway sweeps by with a black blast of iron. The exterminator does a good job. The sailor touched the door gently, following patterns of painted oak in a slow twist, leaving faint, iridescent whorls of slime. His arm went through to the elbow. He pulled back an inside bolt and stood aside for the boy to enter. Heavy, colorless smell of death filled the empty room. The trap hasn't been aired since the exterminator fumigated for coke bugs, said the sailor apologetically. The boy felt a silent black clunk fall through his flesh. The sailor put a hand to the boy's eyes and pulled out a pink scrotal egg with one closed, pulsing eye. Black fur boiled inside translucent flesh of the egg. The sailor caressed the egg with nakedly inhuman hands. Black-pink, thick, fibrous, long white tendrils sprouting from abbreviated fingertips. Death fear and death weakness hit the boy, shutting off his breath, stopping his blood. He leaned against a wall that seemed to give slightly. He clicked back into junk focus. The sailor was cooking a shot. "When the roll is called up yonder, we'll be there, right?" he said, feeling along the boy's vein, erasing goose pimples with a gentle old woman finger. He slid the needle in. A red orchid bloomed at the bottom of the dropper. The sailor pressed the bulb, watching the solution rush into the boy vein, sucked by silent thirst of blood. "Jesus," said the boy. "I'd never been hit like that before." They called me the exterminator. At one brief point of intersection, I did exercise that function and witnessed the belly dance of roaches suffocating in yellow perithium powder. "Hard to get now, lady. War on. Let you have a little, $2. Sluiced fat bedbugs from rose wallpaper in shabby theatrical hotels on North Clark. And poisoned a purposeful rat. Occasional eater of human babies. Wouldn't you?" The Algebra of Need. Fat's terminal came from the city pressure tanks, where open life jets spurt a million forms. Immediately eaten, the eaters canceled by black time fuzz. Few reach the plaza, a point where the tanks empty a tidal river, carrying forms of survival, armed with defenses of poison slime, black flesh-rotting fungus, and green odors that sear the lungs and grab the stomach in twisted knots. Because Fat's nerves were raw and peeled to feel the death spasms of a million cold kicks, Fats learned the algebra of need and survived. One Friday, Fats siphoned himself into the plaza. A translucent gray fetal monkey, suckers on his little soft purple-gray hands, and a lamprey disc mouth of cold gray gristle lined with hollow, black, erectile teeth, feeling for the scar patterns of junk. And a rich man passed and stared at the monster, and Fats rolled pissing and shitting in terror and ate his shit. And the man was moved by this tribute to his potent gaze and clicked a coin out of his Friday cane. Friday is Muslim Sunday, when the rich are supposed to distribute alms. So Fats learned to serve the black meat and grew a fat aquarium of body. and his blank periscope eyes swept the world's surface. In his wake of addicts, translucent gray monkeys flashed like fish spears to the junk mark and hung there sucking, and it all drained back into fats. So his substance grew and grew, filling plazas, restaurants, and waiting rooms of the world with gray junk ooze. The vibrating, soundless hum of deep forest and orgone accumulators. The sudden silence of cities, when the junkie cops and even the commuter buzzes clogged lines of cholesterol for contact. Signal flares of orgasm burst over the world. A T-head leaps up screaming, "I got the fear!" and runs into Mexican night, bringing down backbrains of the world. The executioner shits in terror at sight of the condemned man. The torturer screams in the ear of his implacable victim. Knife fighters embrace in adrenaline. Cancer's at the door with a singing telegram. Hauser and O'Brien. When they walked in on me that morning at 8 o'clock, I knew it was my last chance, my only chance. But they didn't know. How could they? Just a routine pickup. But not quite routine. Hauser had been eating breakfast when the lieutenant called. "I want you and your partner to pick up a man named Lee. William Lee, on your way downtown. He's in the Hotel Lamprey, 103rd, just off Broadway." "Yeah, I know where it is. I remember him, too." "Good. Room 606. Just pick him up. Don't take time to shake the place down. Except bring in all books, letters, manuscripts, anything printed, typed, or written. Catch? Catch? But what's the angle? Books? Just do it." The lieutenant hung up. Hauser and O'Brien. They had been on the city narcotic squad for 20 years. Old-timers like me. I'd been on the junk for 16 years. They weren't bad as laws go. At least O'Brien wasn't. O'Brien was a con man and Hauser the tough guy. A vaudeville team. Hauser had a way of hitting you before he said anything, just to break the ice. Then O'Brien gives you an old gold. Just like a cop to smoke old gold somehow. And starts putting down a cop con that was really bottled in bond. Not a bad guy, and I didn't want to do it, but it was my only chance. I was just tying up for my morning shot when they walked in with a pass key. It was a special kind you can use even when the door is locked from the inside with a key in the lock. On the table in front of me was a packet of junk, spike, syringe, alcohol, cotton, and a glass of water. "Well, well," says O'Brien. "Long time no see, eh?" "Put on your coat, Lee," says Hauser. He had his gun out. He always has it out when he makes the pinch for the psychological effect, and to forestall a rush for toilet, sink, or window. Can I take a bang first, boys? I asked. There's plenty here for evidence. I was wondering how I could get to my suitcase if they said no. The case wasn't locked, but Hauser had the gun in his hand. He wants a shot, said Hauser. Now you know we can't do that, Bill, said O'Brien in his sweet, calm voice, dragging out the name with an oily, insinuating familiarity, brutal and obscene. He meant, of course, what can you do for us, Bill? He looked at me and smiled. The smile stayed there too long, hideous and naked, the smile of an old painted pervert, gathering all the negative evil of O'Brien's ambiguous function. Well, I could set up Marty Steele for you, I said. I knew they wanted Marty bad. He'd been pushing for 5 years, and they couldn't hang one on him. Marty was an old-timer and very careful about who he served. He had to know a man and know him well before he would pick up his money. Now, no one can say they ever did time because of me. My rep is perfect. But still, Marty wouldn't serve me because he didn't know me long enough. That's how skeptical Marty was. Marty, said O'Brien, can you score from him? Sure I can. They were suspicious. A man can't be a cop all his life without developing a special set of intuitions. Okay, said Hauser finally, but you'd better deliver, Lee. I'll deliver all right. Believe me, I appreciate this. I tied up for a shot, my hands trembling with eagerness, an art-type dope fiend. Just an old junkie, boys, a harmless old shaking wreck of a junkie. That's the way I put it down. As I had hoped, Hauser looked away when I started probing for a vein. It's a wildly unpretty spectacle. O'Brien was sitting on the arm of a chair, smoking an old gold, looking out the window with a dreamy what I'll do when I get my pension look. I hit a vein right away. A column of blood shot up into the syringe, for an instant sharp and solid as a red cord. I pressed the plunger down with my thumb, feeling the junk pound through my veins to feed 1,000,000 junk-hungry cells, to bring strength and alertness to every nerve and muscle. They were not watching me. I filled the syringe with alcohol. Hauser was juggling his snub-nosed detective special, a Colt, and looking around the room. He could smell danger like an animal. With his left hand, he pushed the closet door open and glanced inside. My stomach contracted. I thought, if he looks in the suitcase now, I'm done. Hauser turned to me abruptly. You through yet? He snarled. You better not try to shit us on Marty. The words came out so ugly he surprised and shocked himself. I picked up the syringe full of alcohol, twisting the needle to make sure it was tight. Just 2 seconds, I said. I squirted a thin jet of alcohol, whipping it across his eyes with a sideways shake of the syringe. He let out a bellow of pain. I could see him pawing at his eyes with his left hand, like he was tearing off an invisible bandage. As I dropped to the floor on one knee, reaching for my suitcase, I pushed the suitcase open, and my left hand closed around the gun butt. I felt the concussion of Hauser's shot before I heard it. His slug slammed into the wall behind me. Shooting from the floor, I snapped 2 quick shots into Hauser's belly, where his vest had pulled up, showing an inch of white shirt. He grunted in a way I could feel and doubled forward. Stiff with panic, O'Brien's hand was tearing at the gun in his shoulder holster. I clamped my other hand around my gun wrist to steady it for the long pull, and shot him in the middle of his red forehead, about 2 inches below the silver hairline. His hair had been gray the last time I saw him. That was about 15 years ago, my first arrest. His eyes went out. He fell off the chair onto his face. My hands were already reaching for what I needed, sweeping my notebooks into a briefcase with my works, junk, and a box of shells. I stuck the gun into my belt and stepped out into the corridor, putting on my coat. I could hear the desk clerk and the bellboy pounding up the stairs. I took the self-service elevator down, walked through the empty lobby into the street. I spent the night in the Everhard Baths. Homosexuality is the best all-around cover story an agent can use, where a snarling Italian attendant creates such an unnerving atmosphere, sweeping the dormitory with infrared see-in-the-dark field glasses. Walked out in the precise morning and bought a paper. Nothing. I called from a drugstore phone booth and asked for narcotics. Lieutenant Gonzalez, who's calling? I want to speak to O'Brien. A moment of static, dangling wires, broken connections. Nobody of that name in this department. Who are you? Well, let me speak to Hauser. Look, mister, no O'Brien, no Hauser in this bureau. Now, what do you want? Look, this is important. I've got info on a big shipment of H coming in. I want to talk to Hauser or O'Brien. I don't do business with anybody else. Hold on, I'll connect you with Alcibiades. I began to wonder if there was an Anglo-Saxon name left in the department. I want to speak to Hauser or O'Brien. How many times I have to tell you, no Hauser, no O'Brien in this department. Now, who is this calling? I hung up and took a taxi out of the area. In the cab, I realized what had happened. I had been occluded from space-time like an eel's ass occludes when he stops eating on the way to Sargasso. Locked out. Never again would I have a key, a point of intersection. The heat was off me from here on out. Relegated with Hauser and O'Brien to a landlocked junk past where heroin is always $28 an ounce, and you can score for yen pox in the chink laundry of Sioux Falls. Atrophied preface. Wouldn't you? Why all this waste paper getting the people from one place to another? Perhaps to spare the reader stress of sudden space shifts and keep him gentle. And so, a ticket is bought, a taxi called, a plane boarded. There is only one thing a writer can write about: what is in front of his senses at the moment of writing. I am a recording instrument. I do not presume to impose story, plot, continuity. Insofar as I succeed in direct recording of certain areas of psychic process, I may have limited function. I am not an entertainer. Possession, they call it. Sometimes an entity jumps in the body, outlines waver in yellow-orange jelly, and hands move to disembowel the passing whore, or strangle the neighbor child, in hope of alleviating a chronic housing shortage. As if I was usually there, but subject to goof now and again. Wrong. I am never here. Never, that is, fully in possession, but somehow in a position to forestall ill-advised moves. Patrolling is, in fact, my principal occupation. No matter how tight security, I am always somewhere outside giving orders, and inside this straitjacket of jelly that gives and stretches, but always reforms ahead of every movement, thought, impulse, stamped with the seal of alien inspection. Writers talk about the sweet, sick smell of death, whereas any junkie can tell you that death has no smell. At the same time, a smell that shuts off breath and stops blood. Colorless, no smell of death. No one can breathe and smell it through pink convolutions and black blood filters of flesh. The death smell is unmistakably a smell and complete absence of smell. Smell absence hits the nose first because all organic life has smell. Stopping of smell is felt like darkness to the eyes, silence to the ears, stress and weightlessness to the balance and location sense. You always smell it and give it out for others to smell during junk withdrawal. A kicking junkie can make a whole apartment unlivable with his death smell. But a good airing will stink the place up again so a body can breathe. You also smell it during one of those oil burner habits that suddenly starts jumping geometric, like a topping forest fire. Cure is always, let go, jump. Naked Lunch is a blueprint, a how-to book. Black insect lusts open into vast other planet landscapes. Abstract concepts bare as algebra narrow down to a black turd or a pair of aging cojones. How to extend levels of experience? By opening the door at the end of a long hall. Doors that only open in silence. Naked Lunch demands silence from the reader. Otherwise, he is taking his own pulse. Robert Christie knew the answering service. Kill the old cunts, keep pubic hairs in his locket. Wouldn't you? Robert Christie, mass strangler of women. Sounds like a daisy chain, hanged in 1953. Jack the Ripper, literal swordsman of the 1890s and never caught with his pants down, wrote a letter to the press. Next time I'll send along an ear just for jolly. Wouldn't you? I, William Seward, captain of this lushed-up hash-head subway, will quell the Loch Ness Monster with Rotenon and Cowboy the White Whale. I will reduce Satan to automatic obedience and sublimate subsidiary fiends. I will banish the kangaroo from your swimming pools. I will issue a bull on immaculate birth control. Young Dillinger walked straight out of the house and never looked back. Don't ever look back, kid. You turn into some old cow's salt lick. Police bullet in the alley, broken wings of Icarus, screams of a burning boy inhaled by the old junkie, eyes empty as a vast plain. The word is divided into units, which be all in one piece, and should be so taken. But the pieces can be had in any order, being tied up back and forth, in and out, fore and aft, like an interesting sex arrangement. This book spilled off the page in all directions. Kaleidoscope of vistas, medley of tunes and street noises, farts and riot yips, and the slamming steel shutters of commerce, screams of pain and pathos, and screams plain pathic, copulating counts, and outraged squawk of the displaced bullhead, prophetic mutterings of brujo and nutmeg trances, snapping necks and screaming mandrakes, sigh of orgasm, heroin silent as dawn in the thirsty cells. Radio Cairo screaming like a berserk tobacco auction, and flutes of Ramadan fanning the sick junkie like a gentle lush worker in the gray subway dawn, feeling with delicate fingers for the green folding crackle. This is revelation and prophecy of what I can pick up without FM on my 1920 crystal set with antennae of jism. Gentle reader, we see God through our assholes in the flashbulb of orgasm. Through these orifices, transmute your body. The way out is the way in. Now I, William Seward, will unlock my word hoard. My Viking heart fares over the great brown river, where motors putt, putt, putt in jungle twilight, and whole trees float with huge snakes in the branches, and sad-eyed lemurs watch the shore. Across the Missouri field, the boy finds a pink arrowhead. Out along distant train whistles, comes back to me, hungry as a street boy, don't know to peddle the ass God gave him. Gentle reader, the word will leap on you with leopard man iron claws. It will cut off fingers and toes like an opportunist land crab. It will hang you and catch your jism like a scrutable dog. It will coil around your thighs like a bushmaster and inject a shot glass of rancid ectoplasm. I am not American Express. Quick! White flash, mangled insect screams. I woke up with a taste of metal in my mouth, back from the dead, trailing the colorless death smell, afterbirth of a withered gray monkey, phantom twinges of amputation. Taxi boys waiting for a pickup, Eduardo said, and died of an overdose in Madrid. Powder trains burn back through pink convolutions of tumescent flesh, set off flashbulbs of orgasm, pinpoint photos of arrested motion, smooth brown side twisted to light a cigarette. He stood there in a 1920 straw hat somebody gave him. Soft, mendicant words falling like dead birds in the dark street. No, no more, no muss. A heaving sea of air hammers in the purple-brown dusk, tainted with rotten metal smell of sewer gas. Young worker faces vibrating out of focus in yellow halos of carbide lanterns. Broken pipes exposed. They are rebuilding the city. Lee nodded absently. Yes, always. Either way is a bad move to the East Wing. If I knew, I'd be glad to tell you. No good, no bueno. Hustling myself. No glut, plumb flighty.